Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I do have another question for Mr. Wilkins, but before I get to that question, I wonder, prior to this suspension, whether we can just come back and obtain a more specific response to one of the portions of my earlier question, which is, what is a typical day in the life of an inmate at the moment, given the measures that are necessary to impose social distancing? How many hours are they in their cells? How many hours are they allowed out of their cells? How is it translating in practical terms?
Thank you. Like I said, it is a little bit different. If it's an inmate right now incarcerated at, say, Spring Hill Institution in Nova Scotia, or Joliet or CFF in Quebec. There's some freedom of movement, of course, when it comes to recreation in an institution that isn't experiencing an outbreak. But institutions that are experiencing outbreak, the challenging thing is just to make sure that they're getting their food, their medication, and some relief to get some fresh air with a small group of individuals in the institution. So for the majority of their day, yes, the majority of their day would be spent inside of their house or their cell. I can't really give you a number because it fluctuates. Our officers are trying to do the best that they possibly can to make sure that that the inmates are out for the maximum amount of time.
Thank you very much. I do have another question for you, if I have time, Madam Chair.
You have a few minutes. You don't have a lot of time, but yes.
So my question concerns the recommendation of public health experts to liberate a proportion of the inmates from the prison environment, so that the goal of physical distancing is more easily achieved. To what extent and by what criteria are inmates being released? What measures are being taken to protect the public, to protect them? And how do you ensure a positive reintegration for those individuals back into the community?
Well, as the president for the correctional officers don't have a whole lot to do with the inmates' release. Of course, we're there to protect them and protect the public. As far as I'm aware, that there has been much work done by institutional parole officers and community parole officers and the National Parole Board to look at inmates that are, coming near the end of their sentence or eligible for day parole that do not pose a risk. They have been releasing some inmates, but again, I have to go back to the broader part of that question is the release of a few inmates in the institution isn't going to solve the problem when it comes to social distancing. As I mentioned earlier, part of our problem is infrastructure in the institutions. Of course, in an institution where a toilet and a sink is available in an inmate cell, and you have the ability to control movement, isolation becomes easy. In an institution that's widely open, and of course more communal living spaces, it becomes very difficult. So the solution really is not the release of the inmates, in my view. Of course, when they're eligible and it's safe to do so, by all means, that's they go back to the community. But the issue for us is we need to have the ability to protect them in place.